Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe on this Sunday. Going to be going through in today's episode last night's game a little bit more in depth, some certain incidents I didn't pick up on in my rational perspective after the game last night, how Chelsea played, some performances I want to pick out and look at with the stats as well. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit the like button if you're enjoying the content because it helps out the channel as well. And rate and review if you're listening on the podcast. Let's talk about the penalty incident, the two penalty incidents, but obviously mainly Chelsea's penalty incident. Were Chelsea robbed by VAR and the officials last night? I didn't talk about this incident in my review. I find talking about VAR, and I'm sure like a lot of you find it very tiring, find it very stereotypical now. It's quite cliched, the discussion. I think you end up going through sort of a cycle of frustration and you don't really get anywhere. I mean, I feel that for me, just generally, I feel that the blame constantly put on VAR as like VAR's ruining football. I find that a little bit tiresome, to be honest, because I generally don't think VAR is the problem. I think it's the people operating it. And I think we see that time and again. And I think last night was just another prime example of it. Also, when I'm doing my reviews, talking about Mike Dean or Martin Atkinson is not what makes me a football supporter. You know, it's not exhilarating. I don't think it's interesting to you guys. So I feel like it's very stereotypical, and I'll leave that to everyone else to get angry about. Because to be honest, I didn't really get that angry about it. Maybe it's just the fact I'm so used to mistakes from officials now that I just sort of pass it off. I mean, maybe that's the point now. I've got to that point now of just sort of acceptance that's what you're going to get. Or the fact that the Marcus Rashford incident happened like 60 seconds later and Chelsea got away with it there. I don't think it was a clear penalty, not like the Harry Maguire headlock on Cesar Azpilicueta like it was a WrestleMania match. But you know, at the same time, maybe that even things out in my head. I don't know. I think that it's difficult. And I think that Frank Lampard obviously was frustrated in the post-match interview, right too, as you can see here from Simon Johnson in The Athletic, regarding CFC's penalty claim for Maguire's challenge on Dave in the first half. PGMOL confirmed the incident was checked and VAR decided the on-field decision was correct. Amazing. And once again, it's the people, not the tech. And this is something that Frank pointed out in the post-match interview, and I think it's a fair point because I think, you know, there's a lot of sort of anger that you can go with officials and their mistakes, but it's a very clear mistake. And not only that, the monitor now, you know, at the start of the season, it became clear that the officials are going to go and look at the monitor more, which is good, positive. But as I suspected and as I feared at the start of the season, it was going to be more of a gimmick. It was going to be a gimmick in like the opening 2 or 3 games of the season where the officials show that they're going to the monitor. But then by the time we get to game 6, game 7, where we are now, it'd be forgotten about and we just move on. And that happens so often in the Premier League. It becomes a bit of a joke. Just a small thing for me, like last season, it was implemented of this sort of sub rule, right? So a substitute when they're going off the pitch has to go by the nearest line, so the nearest touch line. So it doesn't mean they can walk slowly across the pitch like if you're 1-0 up late in the game in the second half. It's to eliminate that time wasting. Once again, start of the season, that was very heavily implemented and referees were very tight on that thing. But then as soon as we got to November, December, completely forgotten about. And even in games now, it's so slack. And I even though it's a small thing, those things like subs going off the pitch isn't going to define a team winning or losing a game, getting a penalty or not. For me, if you can't implement the most basic of rules there as an official, why should I trust you to get the biggest decision right? Of course it was a penalty. Of course it was frustrating not to get it. But I think that we've got to a stage now where I think we just have to accept it. The officials are not up to a decent standard, in my opinion. And I'm going to continue to see this, unfortunately. But going into the game and looking at it, of course, you know, in terms of formations, Chelsea switching to the 3-back system for the first time this season, the 3-4-3, which we used a lot last season in certain periods and was quite successful at times. It was a great sort of surprise formation that Frank Lampard used in certain situations. I remember the Wolves game, winning 5-2, Tottenham away, Man United in the FA Cup semi-final. I think it's worked several times for Chelsea. In terms of being a consistent formation, I think if you looked at the stats, when we play this formation in 2 consecutive games, it doesn't really work out well for us. I don't think we've won back-to-back games under Frank Lampard with this formation. So we didn't win last night, of course, but I think that's a concern moving forward, whether this is going to be a main formation for Frank Lampard. But obviously worked defensively last night. Man United in a 4-2-3-1 formation, bringing back Harry Maguire into the team, Bruno Fernandes at number 10, Juan Mata, Dan James, Marcus Rashford. And I just obviously want to pick out for me who was man of the match. And I spoke about it last night, gave him lots of praise, but these are the numbers from Squawka that back it up. Thiago Silva, who's my man of the match, felt he had a faultless game last night. Here it is, Thiago Silva's game by numbers versus Man United. 95 touches, 94% pass accuracy, 82 passes, 6 clearances, 3 recoveries, 2 tackles made, 2 interceptions, 2 blocks, 0 times dribble passed, 0 fouls committed, 0 goals conceded. Class is permanent. Absolutely. The leadership and mentality thing, I think when we talk about leadership and mentality, and I've said this on my channel before in terms of when I talk about Chelsea and talk about players, that I don't like to lean too hard on that because I think it can become stereotypical. And I think that just relying on mentality, I think can be a very easy way of looking at the game. And it has been demeaned recently. I think almost to a point now where those things are irrelevant. They're not relevant in the top level of football, but they still are very relevant, especially when I look at Chelsea's sort of defence last season and what we lacked. We lacked a Thiago Silva. So even though they are overused terms, and I like to look at, the tactics of a team, the tactics of a coach, how players are positioned, what we're doing in terms of the style of play and how effective that is to the players within the squad. I still think those things are absolutely key, and having a leader in this team was so largely missed last season. So it's great to have Thiago now there. I also think you've got to praise Frank for creating a system last night, or setting up a defence that doesn't expose his centre-backs like he has for the previous year. I think that's something we've complained about, right? The fact with this progressive sort of dangerous system that a lot of the times, whether it was Kurt Zouma, Antonio Rudiger, Christensen, Tomori being exposed in one-on-ones, we didn't see that a lot last night. And I think although I want to look at Thiago Silva and other defenders and say they had a really good individual performance, which they did, I think you've got to give praise to Frank Lampard for setting something up where there was a solid base in front of the centre-backs to cover them from the likes of Marcus Rashford, which I think is good for Chelsea and I think good moving forward. So I think you need to praise Frank for that. And just looking at the results, I mean, it's so clear now why Edouard Mendy and Thiago Silva should be playing. I mean, just look at our last 4 results. So Crystal Palace, we won 4-0, kept a clean sheet. Thiago Silva and Edouard Mendy starting that game. Then after the international break, Southampton, 3-3 draw, neither of those players playing. And then, of course, against Sevilla, 0-0, another clean sheet, Silva and Mendy playing. And last night, another clean sheet, 0-0, Silva and Mendy playing. Of course, Edouard Mendy has not yet conceded a Premier League goal. I praised him last night. Of course, the saves themselves I wouldn't call them sort of world-class saves. They're not like the best save you've ever seen in your life, but they're important saves. They're in a tight game like that where it's so edgy, it's cagey. Neither team is sort of going for the throat of the opposition. It isn't an end-to-end game. Those are those moments where you have to be on it. And I think a keeper like Mendy, that's going to give him so much confidence and give his defence so much confidence and belief in him that they can bail him out. Because Marcus Rashford is a really talented player. He'll find those moments within a game, like Lampard said in his post-match interview. You expect that within a game, right at the end, keeping his concentration and making some key saves there, especially the last one. I think that's the best one of the night, the best sort of photogenic save he made. But I think all round he had a really good performance. On the flip side, and as I saw in the comments on my videos last night, and just generally, of course, there is that frustration of Chelsea not being as potent and thrilling in attack, and sort of looking at the balance once again of Chelsea being too attack-minded and not leaving us exposed at the back, but now being too defence-minded, that we're not having that fluidity and sort of prowess and clinical finishing and the opportunity to create clear-cut opportunities. I mean, you look at the XG from the XG philosophy of the previous 2 games against Sevilla. It was not only the first 0-0 draw under Frank Lampard, but it was the lowest XG we've created under Frank Lampard. That was 0.43 against Sevilla. It was even lower last night against Man United. So now that takes up that spot very quickly for Chelsea under Frank Lampard. I think that is obviously a concern. As I said last night, I think that you have to be impressed by the defensive improvement. If you were complaining about how shambolic we looked against Southampton, I think you have to be pleasantly surprised by how quickly and how, much we've changed in a week in terms of that and the base you can sort of build on now. Listen, no one is saying that seeing 0-0s over and over again is going to do the world of good for Chelsea. We need to start scoring goals. We've got amazing attackers, but I think number one, you can't just rule out everything that's happened before. The previous 2 games, Timo Werner looking amazing last week and scoring 2 goals we've already scored this season. I think you've got to look at that. I mean, there were certain things Man United did last night that made it very difficult for Chelsea to get the supply line through to the likes of Kai Havertz, Timo Werner and Christian Pulisic. I mean, they really pressed Jorginho and Kante hard because they know Jorginho, especially Jorginho, trying to find that ball over the top, which he did very early on in the game, over Harry Maguire and trying to isolate Man United centre-backs. Unfortunately, a bit like what we did to Man United's attackers, they did to us in terms of getting Werner sort of isolated with Harry Maguire or Victor Lindelof, who had a good game for Man United. It was very difficult. I do think N'Golo Kante had a poor game on the ball. I think he has regressed on the ball. I don't know if his fitness issue, because he even saw times last season he was doing it, and especially under Sarri, the way his game I think developed under him that year. It seems to be a lot of the time now N'Golo Kante will make a great interception to get Chelsea back in possession, but then almost instantly give the ball away. Very late on in the game last night, Chelsea could have had an attack, like the last attack of the game, but just a sloppy pass once again, and I expect better from N'Golo Kante, because I think a lot of people talk about his intercepting, but what was one of the things that really was exciting about the season under Sarri was how his attacking game developed as well. And I think once again this debate comes up about N'Golo Kante being in the team, what's his role in the team, where's the best place to optimize him. I've spoken about this with guests on the channel recently, whether that's Alex Goldberg, Matisse recently. It's a difficult question, isn't it, to answer? But in a game where you want defensive structure, you want a player like N'Golo Kante, but that obviously, when he's as poor on the ball as he was last night, for me, it's going to limit your sort of attacking fluidity. And you think of a Mateo Kovacic in that position, who probably would make the passes, but then there's the risk going the other way. It's a difficult thing for Lampard to solve. I think in the next 2 games, it's going to be very interesting to see how he lines up that midfield, not only in terms of a formation, whether it's the 3-4-3 or for me, I think he will revert back to the 4-2-3-1, because I think Chelsea need to go out and score goals now. And I think, as we saw against Sevilla, the 4-back system worked, getting a solid clean sheet. It's just about maybe bringing Cover back into that system. Maybe Jorginho and Cover could form a good partnership, especially in games where you're playing teams you're expected to beat, and especially against, say, Burnley, a team that are going to sit deep against us, probably a low block where Jorginho and Cover are going to get the ball a lot of the time, and that's probably a great game for them to be in. But with N'Golo Kante, he still has that amazing ability and intelligence to make key interceptions. So it's a really difficult thing, and we need to get the individual skill of Pulisic, Werner, and Havertz working more. I think Havertz, once again, was isolated. There was one moment in the first half where we got the ball into him in a perfect position. I think it was a Ben Chilwell ball over the top, and Kai made a brilliant run in behind the Man United defence, stretched their defence, and then nearly laid it off to Timo Werner. It was almost an inch perfect pass to him. And that would have been, I think, nearly a goal for Chelsea. I'm sure if Werner would have got that under control, I think he would have scored, because it was such a good move. But that's where you want Kai a lot more. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that. And my worry is, at the moment, we're not creating a lot of great goal-scoring opportunities for our attackers. That's why I think out of all the Premier League teams, we have the most varied number of goal scorers so far. There's not a predominant goal scorer, which I think is good if you're seeing goals being shared around. But you want those big attacking players of Pulisic, Werner, Havertz, Ziyech now in the team. Obviously, I don't expect Ziyech to be the top goal scorer, but you know what I mean, those players to really be at the focal point of our attack, and that's something I think Frank needs to work on. Now he's got 2 very solid defensive displays, and if you look at it, take out the Southampton game, 3 out of the last 4 Chelsea games have ended in a clean sheet, which is a positive. So I think you need to be optimistic moving forward. Chelsea cannot draw the next 2 games 0-0. That would be disappointing. But please let me know your opinions on everything I spoke about today. The VAR incident, I'm sure you've got opinions on that. Thiago Silva's perfect performance, Edouard Mendy, our lack of attacking potency. Do you think that improve, and how can Lampard improve it? N'Golo Kante, all that stuff, please let me know in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this episode of Let's Talk Chelsea. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonofChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.